10 and welcome to the last video on Python that I'll be making for a little while. I will be making a video shortly about pseudocode and flowcharts. That will be a separate thing altogether. But this is the last one on using the Python language, and we come to the conclusion of this by talking about classes and objects. Now, when we talk about an object, we're talking about where we can take some code, take some information, all that, bundled up into a thing, and then hand it off to somewhere else. Then when we need that information back, we can go and reference it and say, hey, give me that piece of info you've got, or do this thing for me, or run this thing for me in that particular way. A class is a default structure that then is used to print out objects. Think about it like a template. When you open Word, like you've seen my Word open now, you can set up things like your colors, your heading styles, your fonts, your font sizes, all that sort of stuff can be set up as the default in a particular way by editing the template, right? When we create a file from that, we can think about that like creating an object. So first and foremost, we start out by using a thing for a constructor, and the constructor is where we pass information to it. Now, I've got one here that I prepared earlier. I don't usually do this, I know, but in this particular case, I thought it was easier. This is where we have a class called boat, and we're going to define a start off, and this is called the constructor because it initializes the boat in the first place. Now, we need to pass the memory reference for itself. That's the thing that is required in all of the constructors that we make, and that's a memory reference to where these are going to be stored. You won't need to think too much about that, but it's when you're actually referencing a constructed object, it's whether or not you're referencing this one or another object inside it. Our constructor works very similar to all of the methods we have used. We pass it some information such as name, ship type, age, and color in this particular case, and then we define those as variables that are related to this particular boat class. So down here, this is how we create our object. Our object is created by giving the variable a name, in this case boat1, and we're going to call this, we're going to use the boat class. I'm going to pass it some information. So in this case, the name of the boat will be Titanic. The type will be a passenger liner. It will be 2 years old, and it will be black and red. That's simply the way that we're going to use this. So we've passed it in the same order. And yes, like I showed you, we can do multiple different arguments to a function. So we've passed all four arguments in order. They've been referenced in here, and then they have been saved into this boat. Self.name, ship type, age, and color. Now, the thing that we have as an advantage inside of our class here is we can give this then methods. So like we did with our dictionary where we used, our array where we used .append and those sorts of things, we can write our own methods in here. In this case, we've got one called print details self. So now this print statement, referencing its own information, self.name, self.ship type, is going to be called when we run this print details. If I hit the run button here, you will see that the first thing that happens is this boat is created. Then the print details comes up, and it comes up in this order. The ship's name is Titanic, and it is a passenger liner. It is 2 years old. It's black and red in color. Now, I can easily do this with another boat. So let's go here. First thing I'm going to do is print a line break. Whoops, /n. And then we're going to create boat 2. Boat 2 equals boat, and I'm going to call this the Lusitania, which is going to be a, comma, it's going to also be a passenger liner. This one, however, is going to be 35 years old, and this one is going to be camouflage. And yes, I cannot spell. It was camouflage during the First World War when it was sunk. Because the Lusitania, the Lusitania when it was sunk. So now I can do boat 2 dot print details. Call that function, and if we run this, we should get both boats running. And there it is. This ship's known as the Lusitania. It's a passenger liner. It's 35 years old, and it's camouflaged in color. So now we have two separate boat objects that are run in the same sort of way. And this is where we have a couple of different classes that we can structure. And I've got this information in here, so you can see this. I haven't got too many pieces in here for how they work, but this is it. Now, Again, the advantage of doing things in this particular way is we can then create a collection of boat objects working, and then we can do stuff with that. So I'm just going to copy this. Yes, this is code that I've created earlier. This is not really necessary for your projects for the most part, so you don't need to know this, which is why I'm going through and creating information I've done earlier. But if you want this access, I'm certainly able to give it to you. So now I have created a new collection called All the Boats. And in this, I've created 3 new boats, the Titanic, the Bismarck, and the Endeavour. And I'm going to go through and delete this code here. Oops, and I want to move that bit there down. So I'm going to put our new line character in there. So now we're going to create the Lusitania as a separate boat altogether. Then we're going to create a boat thing, and then we're going to print all of the details for these in order. So if I run this piece of code, we have the ship called the Lusitania we created first off. Then we have our our Titanic here, our Bismarck battleship, and our Endeavour sailing ship. This is a collection where the boats have been created inside the collection, and they reference through all the boats. Now you have access to this array just like any other array. If I go down here, for example, and I want to print, run all the details. So I'm going to go all the boats, and I want to print whatever is in location 2, and I'm going to call .print details. I can go to whatever the third boat, is in this, which should be the Endeavour, and I want to call the print details method on that boat, and there it is right there. Endeavour, it's a sailing ship, it's got all that information. I'll just prove this by cutting that. And if I run this again, we'll have the Lusitania printed and then just the Endeavour. So that's the advantage that we have for being able to create objects and use them inside our arrays and inside of our collections to start off with. We don't even need to think too much about them. So now we can actually have our boat objects and our boat things go through. Now, the last bit that our objects need to look at is something called inheritance. This is where we can create one object that actually is created from another that has its own constructors and such to it in its own way. I'm not going to go into this in any detail here, but I'll just show you this code as it sits here. This is where we can create a class sailing ship, and we can have it pass a boat object into it, and we can then have it call a super constructor by saying a sailing ship is a boat, and we're going to pass information into creating that so that we can then print all of these informations. Now, methods and constructors can be called from either of these, the super or the inherited classes, and this is where it gets somewhat complicated, but also where it gets very, very powerful. Because now we have, and I should in fact be able to copy and paste. I wonder if I can copy and paste this in here. Let me try this. So I'll pause this for a second. Now, what I've done here is I've created a sailing ship class, but this is going to inherit from the boat class. So this is where we need to be a little bit careful about how we structure things. So the boat class needs to be defined before the class is going to inherit it, but this is going to be a sailing ship, not just a regular boat. First, we have our constructor defined, and then the first thing the constructor does is call the super constructor. So a sailing ship is a type of boat. So here it's actually creating a boat object and then expanding it by adding more information. What most people don't realize is the Titanic technically was actually a sailing ship. It had a sail. It didn't use it, obviously, and it didn't really, need it in any way, shape, or form, but it did have a sail on it. So we can call the Titanic here as a sail ship, and I've actually overloaded this constructor by passing it. So I've only passed it what it needs for the boat class, but I've also got this 75 number for its sail, and when we run the print, it says this is actually a sailing ship. It has a sail. So I can call that, and I can also call in here where I want to print this. I can print super dot print details. I should be able to run that as well. No, I can't. Sorry, I missed brackets there. So here, when I've got my print details, I can still call the super method super, and I've got it, I have a pair of brackets there and passing it the print details. So I can still inside this call this method and then change it and add whatever elements I want to it. So it's inherited all of the functions, all the information, all of the storage of the regular boat class, and it's added to it in this sailboat size. So that's where we get some really advanced stuff. This is where things get really, really creative. And there's a couple of little exercises for you to do here. And I don't know why there's a sixth page on that. So that's it. That has been an understanding of Python. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop me an email anytime. I'll be glad to talk you through things or post up on the Google Classroom. All of these will be posted on the Google Classroom very, very shortly. So, excuse me, you'll be able to see them. If you have any questions, just feel free to ask, and thank you very much for watching.